And that means some people here, he's their great-grandfather, some people here, he's their grandfather, and some of us, he's the father. And he was born a long time ago, more than 100 years ago, so that's the sort of distance we're talking. And this poem was written in about 1860. You all know the dates of your music usually. Well, a lot of well-known poems go back a very long way too. And the author was called James Thomas Fields, and he went to America, and he was one of the editors of the Encyclopedia Britannica. And this is called, and my father recited it as a boy. In those days, they didn't have all our recorded stuff, and they had to make their own amusements, and reciting poems was quite a thing. And he would have recited it when he was about 10, and that would be 100 years ago from now. And he remembered it and recorded at times that it was something they all thought was quite funny. Humour changes a bit as well, but it's called Who Stuffed That Owl? And it's set in a barber shop, because back in those days, people would go to their local barber shop every couple of days to get a shave, so the men would all be gossiping like mad, and it was quite a social place, I should imagine. And the poem is, Who Stuffed That White Owl? Who stuffed that white owl? No one spoke in the shop. The barber was busy and he couldn't stop. The customers waiting their turn were all reading the newspapers, Herald and Post, little heeding the young man who blurted out such a blunt question, Who stuffed that owl? No one raised a head, No one made a suggestion, and the barber kept on shaving. "Don't you see, Mr. Brown," cried the youth with a frown, "how wrong the whole thing is, how preposterous each wing is, how flattened the head, and how jammed down the neck. In short, the whole owl is an ignorant wreck. I make no apology, I've learned owliology. I've studied owls and other night fowls. An owl cannot roost with his limbs so unloosed. No owl in this world ever had his neck screwed into that attitude. I've made the white owl my study for years, and to see such a job almost moves me to tears. To look at that owl really brings on a dizziness. The man who stuffed him didn't know half his business." And the barber kept on shaving. Examine those eyes. I'm filled with surprise. Taxidermist would pass off on you such bad glass. So unnatural they seem, they'd make Audubon scream. With some sawdust and bark, I could stuff in the dark an owl better than that. I could make an old hat look more like an owl than that horrid fowl. Just then, with a wink and a sly, normal lurch, the owl very gravely got down from his perch, walked around and regarded the fault-finding critic who thought he was stuffed with a glance analytic, and then fairly hooted as if he should say, "Your learning's at fault this time anyway. Don't waste it again on a live bird, I pray." And the barber kept on shaving. So you can think of if it's your grandfather or great-grandfather reciting that in a sitting room, a Georgian sitting room, about 100 years ago. And this one, the other one, is one that my mother liked and sometimes recited to us. I think she learned it by heart. This is The Listeners by Walter de la Mare, and this has always been quite a well-known poem. It was published in 1912, which was exactly the time our parents were born, and my mother would have learnt it probably about 1930 when she was studying to be an English teacher. So she would have known it long ago. It was already a famous poem, and it still is. "Is there anybody there?" said the traveller, knocking at the moonlit door. And his house in the silence, his horse in the silence, champed the grass of the forest fiery floor. And a bird flew up out of the turret above the traveller's head, and he smote upon the door a second time. "Is there anybody there?" he said. But no one descended to the traveller. No head from the leaf-fringed sill leaned over and looked into his grey eyes, where he stood perplexed and still. But only a host of phantom listeners that dwelt in the lone house then stood listening in the quiet of the moonlight to that voice from the world of men, stood thronging the faint moonbeams on the dark stair that goes down to the empty hall, hearkening in an air stirred and shaken by the lonely traveller's call. And he felt in his heart their strangeness, their stillness, answering his cry, while his horse moved, cropping the dark turf neath the starred and leafy sky. For he suddenly smote on the door extra loud and lifted his head. "Tell them I came, and no one answered, that I kept my word," he said. Never the least stir made the listeners, though every word he spake fell echoing through the shadowiness of the still house from the one man left awake. Aye, they heard his foot upon the stirrup and the sound of iron on steel, iron on stone, and how the silence surged softly backwards when the plunging hoof had gone. Amen.